My name is Khalid Al Fahd. I am 35 years old, and on June 4th, 2020, I went from being the heir to a $1 billion fortune to having absolutely nothing, abandoned on the streets of my own city. I was stripped of everything by my own family for uncovering a truth they could not accept. But it was in that darkness, after I blamed Islam for my misfortune, that Jesus had a radical plan for my life. This is my testimony of how I lost everything to gain everything. I was born in 1990 in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, right at the epicenter of power and wealth. My father, Omar Al Fahd, was not a prince, but his influence rivaled that of royalty. He was the founder and CEO of Al Fahd Global Construction, an empire that had erected skyscrapers in Dubai, refineries in Qatar, and luxury resorts across the entire Gulf. From the moment I was born, I was groomed to be his successor. Our mansion on the Red Sea coast was not simply a house, it was a statement of power. It sprawled over 10 hectares, featuring private beaches, a fleet of luxury cars that included a custom Bugatti Veyron and a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and a helipad on the roof for quick trips to the Riyadh headquarters. I had my own entourage of assistants, tutors, and chauffeurs. My wardrobe was filled with bespoke suits from Savile Row and watches that cost more than the average family home. But let me tell you something about the peaks of worldly success. The air is very thin and the soul feels very lonely. Despite having access to every material pleasure imaginable, I felt an emptiness that no bank account could fill. My training wasn't just in business and finance. My religious education was equally, if not more, rigorous. At the age of 6, I began my studies with a private imam who came to our house every day before dawn. My father insisted that to lead in the Arab world, I had to be an example of Islamic devotion. I was taught to recite the Quran in classical Arabic, a language I spoke in business but felt foreign in prayer. By the age of 15, I had completely memorized it. The 5 daily prayers were non-negotiable, regardless of whether I was in a board meeting in New York or inspecting a construction site in Abu Dhabi. I performed the prostrations, pronounced the words, but my heart felt like a desert. The prayers felt like a transaction, an obligation to maintain the favor of a distant and demanding Allah. As my body bowed toward Mecca, my mind was filled with dangerous questions. Why did this God feel more like a celestial CEO than a loving father? Why did our faith seem so centered on the fear of punishment instead of the joy of redemption? Why were the women in my family, despite their intelligence and capability, treated like valuable assets instead of equals? The pressure to keep up appearances was immense. Our family donated millions to build mosques and fund Islamic charities, all while we closed ruthless deals behind closed doors. I was taught that piety was a tool, a part of our public brand. I watched men being publicly flogged in town squares for drinking alcohol, a crime some of my own uncles committed in the privacy of their yachts in the Mediterranean. The hypocrisy was suffocating. I was told that this was the perfect order of Allah, and to question it was to invite ruin, not just spiritual, but financial and social as well. As I approached my 30s, the pressure to marry the daughter of another magnate intensified. It wasn't about love, but strategic alliances. I felt like a piece on a corporate chessboard, my personal life just another clause in a multi-million-dollar contract. Have you ever felt like you were playing a role in a play you didn't write? That was my daily existence. I had everything the world said should make me happy, but I was drowning in a sea of luxury and loneliness. The yearning for something real, something that couldn't be bought or negotiated, became a constant dull ache in my chest. The catalyst for my ruin and my eventual salvation came in May 2020. I was 30 years old and in New York, finalizing the biggest deal in our company's history, a $50 billion infrastructure project. It was my father's final test, the last hurdle before he officially handed me the reins of the empire. I spent months working around the clock, but due to a betrayal by a trusted partner and a sudden market recession, the deal collapsed overnight. We didn't just lose the contract, we lost billions in preliminary investments. The phone call with my father was the most brutal of my life. There was no comfort, no understanding, only icy rage. "You have dishonored our name," he told me. "You have proven to be weak and incompetent. Do not return until you have found a way to fix this." He hung up, leaving me in the silence of my presidential suite at the Four Seasons, overlooking a central park that suddenly looked like an abyss. For the first time in my life, I had failed in a way so public and catastrophic that no amount of money could hide it. I stayed in New York for a week in a state of shock. I ignored the calls from our executives and the pleas from my mother. I felt like a ghost, wandering the streets of a city that didn't care about my existence. One afternoon, walking aimlessly downtown, it started to rain. Seeking shelter, I ducked under the awning of an old brick building. I didn't realize it was a church until the heavy wooden door opened and an old man with a kind smile invited me inside. "You look like you need a place to dry off and warm your spirit," he said. I hesitated. Entering a church was unthinkable, an act of betrayal to everything I had been taught, but the desperation was stronger than the indoctrination. I went inside and sat in the last row, watching a small group of people sing hymns. Their voices weren't perfect, but they were filled with a joy and peace I had never known. After the service, the pastor, a man named David, sat down next to me. He didn't ask my name or where I came from. He simply said, "You look like you are carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." And with those simple words, the dam broke. I told him everything, the pressure, the emptiness, the catastrophic failure. He didn't judge me. He didn't offer business solutions. Instead, he opened a worn-looking book and read words that changed the trajectory of my life forever. He read from Matthew 11:28. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Tears I didn't know I had began to stream down my cheeks. In my world, rest was earned, success was demanded, and failure was punished. But this man, this Jesus the book spoke of, offered rest unconditionally. He gave me a small English Bible and told me, "True wealth is not found in what you own, but in whom you belong to." When I returned to Jeddah a week later, I knew something fundamental had changed within me. I hid the Bible deep in my suitcase, feeling like I was smuggling a bomb. Back in my luxurious but cold room, I began to read in secret every night. The words of Jesus in the Gospels were like water to a dying man in the desert. He spoke of love, forgiveness, and grace. He spoke of a kingdom where the last would be first, and where a person's worth was not measured by their wealth or status. The more I read, the more I realized that the Islam I had been taught was based on performance and fear, while the way of Jesus was based on a relationship of love and surrender. I began to pray, not the ritual prayers I had recited all my life, but honest, raw conversations with this Jesus who felt more real than my own father. The emptiness in my soul began to be filled with a peace that surpassed all understanding. Subscribe if you have ever felt like you were missing something, even when you seemed to have it all. My change in behavior did not go unnoticed. I lost interest in the more ruthless aspects of the business. I began to question the ethics of some of our deals and to show compassion for the workers on our construction sites, something my father considered a dangerous weakness. He suspected that my failure in New York had broken me. On June 4th, 2020, the confrontation I feared arrived. My father burst into my room without warning while I was reading the Bible. The book was open on my desk. There was no way to hide it. His face went from confusion to disbelief, and then to a fury I had never seen before. "What is this trash?" he roared, snatching the book from my hands as if it were poison. "You are reading the propaganda of the infidels. Have you lost your mind?" I could have lied. I could have fabricated an excuse, said I was researching the competition or trying to understand the Western mindset. But in that moment, a courage that was not my own took hold of me. I looked him in the eyes and said with a calmness that could only have come from God, "Father, I have found the truth. I have found Jesus." The slap was so loud that I fell to the floor. My mother rushed in, alerted by the shouting, and froze when she saw the Bible on the floor and the red mark on my cheek. My father gave me an ultimatum. You will burn this book right now and swear by Allah that you renounce this madness, he hissed. Or you will leave this house with nothing but the clothes on your back. You will no longer be my son. You will be dead to me. I looked at my mother, whose face was streaked with tears, pleading with her eyes for me to yield. I looked at the book on the floor, the words of life that had rescued me from my despair. Think about this right now. What would you do if you were forced to choose between your family, your fortune, your entire identity, and your faith in Jesus? Could you give up the greatest love you have ever known to save your worldly life? I cannot deny the one who saved me, I told him. Jesus Christ is my Lord. Those were the last words I spoke to him as his son. My father's fury turned into a terrifying coldness. He called security and ordered them to escort me off the property. They took my watch, my wallet, my phone. I was forced to take off my designer shoes and was handed a pair of worn sandals from one of the gardeners. In less than 10 minutes, I found myself standing outside the imposing gates of the mansion where I had grown up, with nothing but the clothes on my back. The heir to the Alfad Empire was now a homeless man. The first weeks were hell. Jeddah is a city built on wealth and status. There is no place for someone with no name and no money. I slept in alleys, scavenging for food in the trash bins behind the luxury restaurants I used to frequent. The heat was relentless, and the humiliation even worse. People who would have revered me before now walked right past me without a second glance or looked at me with scorn. In my desperation, anger began to consume me. I blamed my father for his cruelty, and I blamed Islam. I blamed the rigid, unforgiving religion that valued honor and conformity above a father's love for his son. I cried out to God in those lonely alleys, asking why he had led me to a truth that had only brought me suffering and abandonment. I felt completely alone, abandoned by both my earthly family and, it seemed, my heavenly Father. One night, at my lowest point, huddled behind a mosque to shelter from the wind, having not eaten for 2 days, I pulled out the only possession I had left. Before security threw me out, I had managed to tear a single page from the Bible my father had thrown on the floor. It was from the Gospel of John. In the dim light of a street lamp, I read the words over and over. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I wept and prayed with a desperation I had never felt before. Jesus, I whispered to the star-filled sky, if you are real, if you truly have overcome the world, show me the way. I cannot do this alone. I am finished. In that moment, a profound, almost supernatural peace settled over me, and then, in the silence of that alley, I heard a voice. It wasn't audible, but it resonated deep within my spirit, crystal clear. My son, I have not abandoned you. Your suffering is not your end, but your beginning. I have stripped you of the world's riches so that you can discover the riches of my kingdom. Your deliverance is near. The experience was so profound, so real, that I knew without a doubt that I was not alone. The fear and anger dissipated, replaced by an unwavering trust. The next day, the first miracle happened. As I was searching for water, a car pulled up beside me. The driver was a Filipino man who worked as an engineer for a European company. He looked at me with compassion. "You look like you need help," he said in broken English. His name was Mateo, and as I learned later, he was a devout Christian. He took me to his small apartment, gave me food, water, and a place to shower. He was part of an underground network of expatriate believers who helped local converts facing persecution. It was not a coincidence. It was a divine answer to my desperate prayer. For the next few weeks, I lived in hiding with this community of believers. For the first time, I experienced what true brotherhood was. These people, who had almost nothing compared to my former life, shared everything with me. Their faith was not a public performance. It was a vibrant, life-giving reality. Organizing my escape from Saudi Arabia was incredibly dangerous. My father, realizing I hadn't come crawling back to beg for forgiveness, had used his influence to put me on a watch list. My passport was flagged. Legally, I could not leave the country, but the Christian network had connections. With the help of a human rights organization in Germany, they secured me false travel documents and an escape plan. The journey involved being hidden in a cargo truck crossing the border into Jordan, an 18-hour ride in suffocating darkness and constant fear. From Amman, with my new identity, I boarded a flight to Berlin. As the plane took off and I watched the lights of the Middle East fade beneath me, tears streamed down my face. Tears of grief for everything I had lost, but also tears of overwhelming gratitude for the life and freedom God had given me. I landed in Berlin in July 2020 with nothing but a small backpack and a giant faith. I applied for political asylum, and my case was quickly accepted thanks to the documentation provided by the human rights organization. The church that had helped me escape took me in. They gave me a place to live, helped me learn German, and most importantly, discipled me in my new faith. A few months later, I was baptized in a lake outside of Berlin. As I rose from the cold water, I felt the old Khalid, the heir to a business empire, had died, and a new man, a son of the King of Kings, had been born. Life has not been easy. My family has completely disowned me. My father held a symbolic funeral for me and has threatened to use all his resources to find and silence me. I have struggled with loneliness and the trauma of everything I lost, but I have discovered a profound truth. When Jesus is all you have, you realize that Jesus is all you need. The peace and purpose I have found in him far outweigh any wealth or status the world could offer. God has begun to use my story in ways I could never have imagined. I started an online ministry, sharing my testimony anonymously to protect my safety. Through this ministry, I have been able to connect with hundreds of other truth seekers in the Muslim world, people who, like me, feel the emptiness of materialism and the burden of religious legalism. I have helped connect persecuted converts with the same underground networks that saved my life. In 2023, I married a wonderful German woman, Anna, whom I met at church. She is a human rights advocate and shares my passion for helping those persecuted for their faith. Together, we serve God, knowing that our true inheritance is not in this world. Right now, wherever you are listening, Jesus is calling you. He may not ask you to give up $1 billion fortune, but he is asking you to surrender control of your life to him. The question you must answer is simple yet profound. How much is Jesus worth to you? Is he worth your comfort, your reputation, your plans, your entire life? Every day I breathe as a free man in Christ is a miracle. If God could take the dishonored heir of a Saudi magnate, pluck him off the streets, and give him new purpose and a new life, there is no situation, no failure, no broken heart he cannot redeem. Jesus is still working miracles, and you could be the next one. Subscribe if you believe God exists.